So I want to thank the CTO's restaurant group for having us here tonight and the Lanza family for sponsoring us. I have to thank my full-time secretary slash assistant slash agent who does this for us full-time as a volunteer, my mom, who would not be possible without her. And it's her birthday. Also, Sarah Rooney is here tonight. You may have met her at the front door. She did the graphic design for all the beautiful posters you see around here. And I commonly email her at midnight and say, I need this, and can you do it for me by the morning? And she does it, all of our designs. So thank you to Sarah and all the other people in this room who helped make this event possible. So before I start talking about what we're doing in Rwanda, I wanted to answer a couple of questions that I get asked a lot. I figured just go ahead and get these out on the table before we move on. So the first one, people ask more often than you would think, and it was first posed to me by a friend of mine in Tampa who, when I first got back from Rwanda, said, oh, so you were in Rwanda, that must have been a pretty short flight. And I said, no, it's actually pretty long, about 19 hours of flying. And he looked really confused, and he said, but Rwanda's an island in the Caribbean, right? And I said, no, Rwanda's actually a country in East Africa. And it's surrounded by the Congo, Uganda, and Tanzania. It's about the size of Maryland and has 10 million people. So it's the most densely populated country in Africa. Just to put it in comparison, the Congo is the size of Western Europe. So Rwanda's a small but nice little neighbor. So the second question I get asked all the time is, how do you represent your home state when you are in Africa? And I think I do that pretty well. So the third question that I get asked the most is, why Rwanda? Why did you decide to go off to Rwanda of all places in the world? And the answer to that question happened a number of years ago. I was a freshman at Vanderbilt when I saw this picture, and it changed my life. So this is a picture of a man named T.N.S. Bagasora, and he was one of the masterminds of the Rwandan genocide. So along with this picture, I read an article that described in detail how 1 million people were killed in the span of 100 days in 1994 in Rwanda. About 500,000 girls were raped, and another 2 million people were displaced to refugee camps around the world. I couldn't even wrap my mind around this number and what unimaginable tragedy people had gone through there. There were over 1.5 million orphans, many who had borne witness to the brutal slaughter of their parents in front of them, and were thus sentenced to a life of poverty on the streets. I ripped out this picture and I put it on my bulletin board for 2 reasons. One, it reminded me of the commitment that I had made that day to go to Rwanda and be a part of their reconstruction process. And 2, it reminded me of this quote, that all it takes for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. I studied international development at Vanderbilt and wrote my senior thesis on Rwanda and left for Rwanda about 3 days after I graduated. I had been accepted to participate in a delegation on human rights and reconciliation in the country. So I showed up, and one of the first weekends that I was there, I met a woman named Laura who was making a documentary on illiteracy in the country. And she asked me to go with her to a small town outside of the capital to interview teenagers about their life and what it was like being a young Rwandan man or woman. So we headed out to this town and started interviewing teenagers in the region who were not in school and who had lost their parents in the genocide. So Nyamata, this town, has one of the highest concentrations of orphans and child-headed households in the country. During the genocide, about 80% of the Tutsi population was killed. After we did these interviews, we went to a church that was in the neighborhood, and during the genocide, about 10,000 people were killed in this church. And this day had such an impact on me. It's hard for me to explain this, but I walked into this place and saw a place of worship that was supposed to be a refuge and a sanctuary for people, and we saw the blood that was still on the ground from the lives that had been lost there. The survivors in the region had requested that it stay the way that it was during the genocide to pay homage to the people that had lost their lives. In this part of the country, about 5 of every 6 Tutsis were killed. This was the nursery where the children were. They left the clothes as they were as well. So in 2007, I started a nonprofit based here in the States to work with children in Rwanda. So we ran an orphanage in the capital of Kigali. We put these kids back in school, gave them educational scholarships, and also organized conferences and seminars for genocide survivors. And it's because of a lot of people that I can see in this room tonight that these kids are in school and don't live on the streets anymore. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of that. Although I had first gone to Rwanda to participate in human rights and reconciliation, I quickly realized that when you talk to a child that lives in a mud hut with no electricity, or a woman younger than me who's the head of her household, that those words don't mean much. So I realized that these young women and men, they wanted jobs and they wanted education to provide for themselves and take control of their own lives. So the challenge in Rwanda, about 10% of the population graduates from high school, 1% finishes university, and about 1/3 of those university graduates are women. So what does that mean in daily reality? This is a woman that many of you probably saw on your invitation. She goes to Nyamata High School, which is down the road from that church, and she lost her parents in that church. So she is going to graduate from high school in about a year or 2, and is going to want to continue her studies. But because of the fact that she lives in rural Rwanda, her parents were killed in the genocide, and because she's a woman, it's highly unlikely that she's going to do anything else. The facts show us that she will most likely work in the fields and have more than 5 children at a young age. So I think we've all realized quickly around the world, across boundaries, ethnicities, in every part of the world, that educating girls yields a higher rate of return than any other investment available in the developing world. So our question became, how can we create a model of education in a school that can train these young women that have the potential to continue their studies, but most importantly, train them in skills that are going to allow them to get good jobs so that they can take care of their families. So while I was working on this, a guy named Dave Hughes came into my life. So Dave was working in finance in London when his roommate brought home a book about the Rwandan genocide. He read that book and started Googling organizations about Rwanda, found our website, and sent me an email. And about 1.5 years ago, contacted me and said, "Do you need any help in Rwanda?" I said, "Yeah, sure, come on down. I need all the help I can get." So he quit his job the next day and told his family that he was going to Rwanda for 7 months to help build the school. So Dave and I spent several months, along with a few interns and Rwandan volunteers, meeting with the head of the Ministry of Education, the Workforce Development Authority, private sector leaders in Rwanda to figure out what are the training needs in the business community in Rwanda. If we're going to open this school, our fundamental mission is that these young women get good jobs when they graduate. So what do you, as the private sector, need to see in the Rwandan education system? So we had people in the Rwanda Development Board, the Ministry of Youth, the UN World Food Program, and other groups that were helping us. And the answer that we got really surprised us. They said that the hospitality industry is actually the fastest growing sector of the Rwandan economy. So people are coming from around the world to see Rwanda's lakes and mountains, and to see the mountain gorillas, and to enjoy Rwanda, but they don't have the human capital to fill these jobs. So they're bringing people from Uganda and Kenya to work in these positions. Okay, so what does all this mean? If we could train women to work in this sector, they're going to graduate and there's going to be an overwhelmingly high demand for their services. So we can actually respond to the needs of the private sector to make sure that they get good jobs to take care of